Let's return to This Week in America. Here's your host, Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, coast to coast. Thank you for joining us. Out of Darkness into Light by Lauralee Lindholm is a story of a spiritual battle in the highlands of Ethiopia 50 years ago. As God worked in the lives of the people, Satan counterattacked and tried to stop it. The first person to accept Jesus as Savior was a priest in the local Orthodox church, but surprisingly, he was also the head wizard of the area. The book is an exciting account of the events that transpired as people came out of the darkness into light. Lauralee was a missionary in Africa for 18 years. Most of the time was spent in the highlands of Ethiopia, where she was part of a community development team working in an area that was 100% Orthodox Christian. When they had to leave Ethiopia due to communism, she taught ESL to young children and helped her husband build a business called Kingdom Homes. Since 2006, she has managed a nonprofit bookstore. Using volunteers and selling donated books, they've raised $1,600,000 to benefit the development work of a church in Ethiopia. Lauralee Lindholm, author of the spiritual warfare memoir, Out of Darkness into Light, winner of the International Impact Book Awards, is our guest on This Week in America. Lauralee, welcome to the program. A pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. I am delighted to be here.
Delighted to have you. And what a remarkable story you tell in Out of Darkness into Light. Let's talk about the motivation, the inspiration to share this story. Where did this come from, the idea to write Out of Darkness into Light?
When it was happening, all we could do was just see what God would do every day. But when the communists kicked all the missionaries out of Ethiopia, then we came home to the U.S., and I said, I have to write this story. We have to tell the world. It's so unique, so wonderful to see God working today. So for 3 months, I sat down and wrote everything that had just happened in the last 3 years. And that was 50 years ago.
What a memory. And you bring it all to life. We feel like we're there and sharing these experiences with you. The author and our guest, Lauralee Lindholm. The book is Out of Darkness into Light. Her website is bookslauraleelindholm.com. We'll give you that as we go through the program. And a link, of course, on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You were no strangers to the challenges of missionary work. You taught at high school in Nigeria. Talk about the decision to go to Ethiopia. What was that like, and why did you decide to go to Ethiopia?
When we were children, my husband and I each felt God calling us to be missionaries in Africa. And then when we were ready to go, they needed school teachers in Nigeria. So we went, and I thought we would be there the rest of our lives. But my husband really had a desire to go out and reach people in the countryside who had no chance to hear the gospel at all. And just at that time, as we had finished our first term in Nigeria, the head of African missions for our Southern Baptists had been to Ethiopia, and he had met with the emperor and 2 other missionaries, and the emperor said, we don't need any new churches, but if you would do community development, you could go to my area of the mountains of Ethiopia and start mission work there. So he came to Nigeria, and to the airport. Nobody met him, and he was important. But he called the home of the head of the Nigerian mission, and we happened to be living in their house while they were on furlough. So by accident, which was not accident, of course,
yes,
he got us, and we went and picked him up, and he was so excited to tell us that they were going to start a community development program with a doctor, a veterinarian, an agriculturalist, and a handcraft teacher. And that part was a bit unusual, but they raised sheep in the mountains of Ethiopia, and they needed somebody to help them use the wool from the sheep for profit to make their lives better. And so he said they're going to need a handcraft teacher to teach rug weaving. So that got planted in our minds, and we went home on furlough, and they contacted us and said, do you want to go and teach rug weaving? And my husband said, do I? And that was how that happened.
It's an amazing story, and that story and so many more in Out of Darkness into Light by Lauralee Lindholm, our guest on the program. Then you get there and you talk about the daunting reality of life in the Ethiopian highlands. What did you find when you got to Ethiopia, your new home?
Well, we left civilization and went to a land time forgot. They were still living in mud huts without running water, without electricity, without anything. One step from famine because they didn't have irrigation. They depended on rains, and if it didn't rain, they starved. And besides that, worse than that, they fought about everything. And they lied, and they did every bad thing you can think of. And so we were in the Wild West. My husband hauled corpses on the top of our car when they needed to be buried after battles and things. So we found the Wild West, but we knew that was where we were supposed to be. And did they need the gospel? So we did community development work to help make their lives better and tried to make good friends.
Well, let's talk about that aspect of it. Once you realize what you're dealing with when you get there, you need now to reach out to these people that are not very trusting to begin with and earn the credibility so that you're effective in working with them and talking with them and developing friendships. How did you establish credibility?
By helping them. The clinic helped them with every kind of sickness. But most of all, it helped them after they beat each other up all the time, sewed them back up again. And then my husband, when he taught rug weaving, they got money from their wool. And it really helped their families. That made a big difference. They could send their kids to school and buy new clothes and so on. And then they all were dependent on their animals, so the veterinarian was very important. And they were all farmers. So help with fertilizer and farming methods was also a big help. So we made friends that way. And we ate in their homes. We ate what they offered us, and you never believe what we ate. And God kept us well. And we taught Bible studies, preached at every clinic where the doctor and the vet were, and daily at the handcraft school, and taught Bible lessons to ladies. And so we were teaching the Bible while we were teaching community development and being patient.
How long did it take for you to see results where you felt like, okay, we are starting to make an impact on their lives now? How long a period was that?
It was 6 years.
Wow.
6 years is a long time.
Yes.
But the missionaries met together and prayed every week. We were very certain that God had called us there. The emperor himself had invited us, and a very important legal advisor to the princess was the person who got us in there, got our land, chose the people for the handcraft school. They were all deacons and priests of the Orthodox Church. And so we knew God's hand was in it. And so we just had to wait it out.
It's an amazing story, Out of Darkness into Light. It's so well done and so many levels to see what you went through and the results and the patience you had. And let's talk about that for a second. How difficult was it to maintain your enthusiasm, your sense of hope as you were going through 6 years before you really saw some tangible results? How tough was that for you?
It was hard.
Yes.
But again, because we were so sure God was behind it. And I will confess, at the end, we said, God, just give us a sign. One born-again believer. One is not a lot.
Yes.
And it was just a matter of a week or two before a priest came as a result of a priest Bible study that we had started, because they didn't know the Bible at all. They had read it in Ge'ez, which is an ancient language that they no longer speak. It has the same alphabet as the Amharic Bible, but again, they didn't know what it said. And so we brought them Amharic Bibles and had this Bible study. And he said, I found the 10 Commandments, and I've broken almost all of them. Everybody has. And I know that's wrong. And I want to confess my sin to God and get the forgiveness that Jesus has to offer. And he did. And we were thrilled. And we said, thank you, God. One person believing, that's enough. Now we can go on and keep being patient. And So 2 weeks went by, and then he came back again. And he said, I found in Acts where the one man burned his magic books because he was a wizard. Do you think he needed to do that? And we said, oh, yes, you can't worship Satan and God too. He said, that's what I thought. I want to bring my magic books to the big tent on Sunday and burn them in front of everybody and tell them I'm believing in Jesus. And we said, wow. Your magic books? He said, yes, I'm the head wizard of this area. Didn't you know? No. We thought we knew there were wizards. They're called tongue-wise, but we didn't think we knew one. And we were sure if we ever met one, we'd recognize it. And here he was, our best friend, a wonderful, nice man. But he had been placating Satan in all that he did, and now he stopped. And so he did that. And it made a huge impression on the people to see one of their own people, not just a missionary, saying that Jesus is the way.
It's an amazing story. I mentioned that at the beginning because as you read that, it's like you can see things change. You can feel things starting to change at that moment during their missionary work in Ethiopia. Out of darkness into light. Our guest on the program is the author of the book, Lauralee Lindholm. What surprised you most when you were there? Were there any surprises that really caught you off guard?
Well, that was the biggest one.
Oh, yes.
That he was a wizard. And then to see Acts come about like that.
Yes.
We prayed that they would know the power of prayer because all they had was memorized ritual, Mass. Mass is long and same thing over and over and over and over. And we prayed that they would realize God was real and that they could approach him. So God again answered that prayer in a very strange way. We lived in a little tent next to a big circus tent that we met in, that we set up in an area about 20 miles from our home. And we lived out there for 3 years to be near the people. And so we did go home once a week to have a bath and meet the missionaries for prayer meeting and get some more food. But we really did live there. And so one week we went home and for our prayer meeting and supplies and came back and the tent was open and the stuff inside was turned upside down. And then everybody, it was a big crowd there, gathered and said, uh-oh, now you're going to leave. Our people are bad. You shouldn't have left your tent. There was a guard, but he was gone. And we said, it's all right. God's in control. It's okay. They said, you need to go to the police and tell them all about this. Well, we've had already dealings with police, and all they would say is, you foreigners are stupid. If you'd take better care of your stuff, nobody'd steal it. So anyway, we said, no, we weren't going to do that. So they said, well, make a list at least. So we did that. We made this big, long list and figured we'd lost about $600 worth of irreplaceable stuff in Ethiopia that we had brought from America, all our teaching supplies, among other things. And then for 3 days, everybody came to cry. People we never, ever got to know before, but they had heard about us. And we kept saying, God's going to take care of it. We've committed it to him in prayer. It's okay. Don't worry. And we didn't worry. We slept good. And then after 3 days, somebody came and said, we think we found your stuff. And there was a community grazing area, wide open area with no trees or anything. And right out in the middle, in plain sight, were 3 big bundles wrapped up in sleeping bags and in my coat. So we went, got them, and put them in the car and brought them back to the tent. And all the people watched as we opened them up and checked them against the list. We got every single thing back, even things we had not yet missed, except for one thing. We had a little bottle of low modal, which is synthetic opium, and all those pills were gone. The bottle was there, open. So we think they took those pills. They're kind of sweet, and we cannot imagine what that would do to you, but it might make you give everything back. We'll never know that. But the people all said, you do have a direct contact with God. You prayed to God that he would take care of it, and he did. We can see that God is listening to prayers today.
It's such an amazing story. Out of darkness into light. Lauralee Lindholm is our guest on the program. Time is going by so quickly. You mentioned, characterized the book actually is watching a spiritual battle, and that was tough. Evil forces were at work against you during your entire time there. Talk about that aspect of it.
Because in the Orthodox Church, they sacrifice animals to the evil spirits. Everybody wears charms around their neck that they get as a baby against the evil spirits. They're very afraid of them. They just want to be left alone. And that's where the wizards come in. They say, well, we'll take care of you. So because all of that wizardry is mixed in with their trying to keep the laws of the church, it's a very hopeless area. And that's why we called it, the book I did, Out of Darkness into Light, because the light of knowing that God will take care of you, that Jesus has won the victory. And that's what happened. That's the wonderful story.
With us on the program is Lauralee Lindholm, Out of Darkness into Light, the book. Her website is books, lauraleelindholm.com. I'll spell all that for you as we go through the interview. And, of course, a link on our website take you directly to her website, as if you go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. God did so many things, miracles, to show that he was real. We talked about that, and you talk in detail in the book, talked about that with the local priest, in a remarkable story a few minutes ago. What were the results after 3 years of teaching real believers? What was that like? What were the results, and how did that make you and your husband feel?
Well, we were teaching these little groups of people and where they went to the clinics and everything. And then we thought, well, we need to do something to give them opportunity to make a public decision. So we had a revival meeting. We rented the community hall. They let us use it for a week because our mission had provided the windows and doors. And we brought evangelists from the capital city to speak, and invited priests and deacons from all over where we were doing mission work. And about 100 came. And then all the townspeople came in the daytime, and there was Bible teaching every day. And then at night, as they slept on the hay, we had talks together and so on. And then Priest Girma told about his big decision and his change. And then the next night, one after another, people in that meeting stood up to confess sin and ask God to forgive them and to give them salvation. So we experienced a whole night of Holy Spirit revival, to which, when the meeting was over, they were all excommunicated, and we were accused of feeding them donkey meat at the meeting, which we did not, and a public trial, and they asked us to leave the country, and so we had to leave the mountain area. It was time for a vacation. Our kids got out of boarding school then, and we went to Kenya for a month, and almost cried the whole month, yes, wondering if we were going to get to go back or not. But we were in the most beautiful place. And so a lot of people began believing at that point. And because they were excommunicated, persecution fans a revival always. And so they grew stronger and grew in number. Eventually they were allowed back in their churches, but they were already getting strong in their faith. And so at the end of 3 years, the communists came, and there was a war in Ethiopia, and all the missionaries had to leave. And we went away for 18 years, and we did not know what would happen to them. But when I retired from school teaching, we went back and found a group of about 12,000 believers in a small number of churches. And we started encouraging them. And today, 18 years later, there are 350 churches with 35,000 members. And they're growing and they're strong. Their challenge for this year is each church plant another church. Isn't that a great goal?
Oh, yes, yes. It's just amazing the success that you had, and boy, time has gone by so quickly. I want to just take a second here. When you were leaving, what was that like? Leaving
Oh.
people, especially under the circumstances, that had to be a very emotionally trying time for you. What all you went through when you think back to the start and at the finish, when you were seeing lives being changed. What was it like leaving that part of your life behind and leaving these people behind?
Oh, it nearly broke our heart, and theirs too. We all cried together because we didn't know if we would ever see them again. Communism is a terrible thing. And so we didn't know if we would ever get to go back to Ethiopia. And so at our very last meeting, one of them stood up and said, I feel God calling me. I came here to learn to be a deacon, and God is calling me to go back home and tell them. And another one said, God gave the light to the Orthodox Church and they let it go out. I feel called to be a teacher. And another one stood up and said, the children need to know. I feel called to teach children. And another one said, I learned to be a deacon far from here, and I want to buy a donkey and take Bibles and tell them because they don't know. And so we had, the group agreed that they were called by God, and we had laying on of hands. They knelt down. We were outside on the ground. Well, we were in a circus tent, but on the ground.
Yes.
And as they knelt on the ground, the people came around and laid hands on them and prayed for them. And we had a commissioning service right there before we left. And that was the nucleus of the leaders of the group that we left behind, that fire that did not go out.
What a remarkable story. And I mentioned the fact that you continue to raise funds, $1.6 million to date, to benefit the development work of a church in Ethiopia. So your good deeds continue and continue to touch lives, even though you're here in the United States. Lauralee, it's been a pleasure having you on the program. What a remarkable story, a job well done, a life well lived. Thank you for being with us on the program.
Thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed it immensely.
It has been our pleasure, and our guest is Lauralee Lindholm. I'll spell that so you can go to her website. Lauralee is Lauralee, Lindholm, Lindholm. Her website is bookslauraleelindholm.com. Book available wherever books are sold, of course, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I'll direct you to the website. You can order there, get all the information on Lauralee and the book. I'd like to thank EC Publishing, LLC, for arranging our conversation with Lauralee today. And, of course, all this information on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You are listening to This Week in America, and we're back on today's program right after these messages.
This Week in America is online. You can visit our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Scott Pinkerton, associate producer of This Week in America. Jay Anderson, segment producer. Ben Watson, webmaster. Otto Bechet, director of engineering and TV production. This Week in America produced and is a trademark of Blue Funk Broadcasting, LLC. For information on all of our guests and to listen to this week's show, our website again at thisweekinamerica.us. And I'm Sean Bratton, executive producer of This Week in America.